Good morning and welcome to the Mischa Toland Show. I hope you've had a great weekend. Today I want to talk about a topic that is relevant to all of us because we are in our physical beings, and that is physical wellness. We've been covering the topic overall about wellness. Today I want to talk about physical wellness, and I have an amazing guest with me named Tia Timpson. She had a massive stroke, and while some thought she wouldn't make it, she's here along with her parents to tell us not only about the goodness of God, but of what she had to do in her physical body to get through what could have been a fatal accident experience. We'll be right back. We're back. I shared with you that I have a wonderful, wonderful guest named Tia Timpson, who I had the opportunity to meet a couple of weeks ago at my launch party, and we had a conversation that was so compelling. I wanted her to be here with me to excite you and to inspire you the same way that she inspired me. Welcome, Tia.
Thank you for having me, Mischa.
I'm so happy to have, it is my pleasure. I am really honored to have you. I want you to imagine this with me. Imagine you're 20 years old, you're a junior in college, you are away from everything and everybody familiar, including your parents. It's a Sunday afternoon, and you're sitting in the dorm with your fellow students watching a football game. That's one thing. But then imagine being a parent, and you send your child away to college to get a great education, only expecting that they're going to do some partying, right, Tia? They're going to get out and see the sights and have a good time and make new friends and go to football games and, of course, watch football games. But you never think that you're going to get the phone call that Tia's mom and dad actually got on September the 12th of 2010, and we're going to talk to them later in the show. But I want to start with what Tia experienced on the afternoon of September the 12th, 2010. So as I shared with the audience, you're in the dorm room with your colleagues or your college mates,
Yes.
and you're watching a football game just on a regular Sunday afternoon.
Yes.
So what happened?
I had to use the bathroom, so I went to go walk over to the bathroom, and my whole side was weak, and I was stumbling and almost falling over, and I kept saying, "Take me to the bathroom." It was really slurred, and I had a headache that morning, really bad.
So the slurring, did you recognize it, or you knew it because your friends were telling you?
I actually didn't realize that my speech was slurring until I learned the stroke warning signs, and I said, "Oh, slurred speech is a stroke warning sign." I said, "I remember my speech was slurred that day."
Okay.
It was like long after my stroke that I recognized what was actually happening to me.
And so in the morning, you were saying that you had a bad headache.
Yes.
What about the headache?
It was really bad. I was looking everywhere for pain medicine.
Now, are you prone to headaches at all?
No.
So a headache just comes from nowhere?
Out of nowhere.
Was it unusually painful, or does it just feel like a normal headache?
I think so. I don't really remember how bad it was, but the hospital did say I described it as the worst headache I ever had in my life.
Wow. So we have a headache, we have numbness of the body, and
Yes.
then we have slurred speech.
Yes.
So all of those things are coming together, all of those things are happening to you, and your friends have the presence of mind and the wherewithal to say something isn't right, and they call 911, and then what happens?
I was taken to a first hospital. They didn't even recognize my symptoms as stroke warning signs.
Wow. So you're in a hospital setting,
Yes.
and you're having a stroke, and they don't even know that she's having a stroke. Can you imagine that? That you are in a place where they're supposed to be able to care for you and tend to you, and they're unable to do that because they don't know what to do. So I imagine that because they don't know what to do, you can't stay at that hospital.
Right.
So what happens next?
They decide that they can't help me, so they transfer me to a larger hospital that's better equipped to help me. And I was actually driven to that hospital, not flown.
Okay, so you came in a car, not so much in the ambulance.
I guess the ambulance.
Okay.
Well, from the first hospital to the second hospital, they said it wasn't bad enough for me to be flown there, so they drove me in the ambulance.
Okay. I understand from talking to you that there was a window with respect to the blood clot, and
Yes.
you missed the window because you were at the hospital that it couldn't treat you. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, there's a window like that you're supposed to catch the stroke and receive the blood clot to bless that clot, and it will make your stroke less disabling.
And
The
because
longer,
I'm sorry.
the longer it takes to get that blood clot busted, your swelling will get worse and your stroke will get worse.
Wow.
And that's what happened to me.
So did you ever have any of these symptoms prior to September the 12th?
No, I was perfectly healthy.
Okay. Did family members have strokes?
My grandfather died from a stroke.
Okay. So did they ever at all say that because you come from a family where people have had strokes that you had like a predisposition?
No, mine was caused by a hole in my heart that I didn't know I had, and then a blood clot went through that hole and traveled to my brain. So there was really no preventing my stroke.
So
Like it wasn't because of age or anything. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So you're walking around with a hole in your heart and you don't know it?
Exactly.
Wow. And because of the hole in the heart, just tell me again. I just missed that part because I'm just so overwhelmed by how this all happened. So
There's a valve that's supposed to close after you're born, but mine didn't. And so I had that hole my entire life. And the blood clot somehow went through that hole, then traveled to my brain, blocked the major artery, and caused the stroke.
wow. This is 20 years into your life
Yes, exactly.
that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Amazing. I mean, wow. The way that God kept you, even for 20 years, you're walking around and you don't know what's going on. So we're at the second hospital.
Right.
And what happens? What
They
do they
finally
tell you
said,
then?
this girl's having a stroke, we need to do something. And my swelling was so bad, they had to do an emergency hemicraniectomy to take off a section of my skull to save my life because my brain was swelling so badly.
Wow. So in taking off the part of your skull,
Yes.
what did that allow to happen for your brain?
Because the brain would swell against my skull, and then I would die. They said that swelling would go all the way down to my throat, and I would suffocate and die because of that swelling. So they had to take that off to allow for my brain to expand.
Wow. And you are here talking to us. She is here talking to us. We will be right back with more of Tia's story.
Hi, my name is Tia Timpson, and I'm a stroke survivor. Knowing the stroke warning signs can help save a life. If you think somebody's having a stroke, remember the word fast. F is for face. Ask the person to smile. See if you notice any weakness or droopiness on one side of their face. Then A is for arm. Ask them to raise their arm and see if you notice that it's weak or dangling. S is for speech. Ask them to say a simple sentence and see if you notice any slurred speech or stumbling over their words. If you notice any of those, remember it's T. Time to call 911 as soon as possible. My stroke almost killed me, so please try to help save another life. Thank you.
And we're back with Tia Timpson. September the 12th, 2010 was a life-changing moment for her. She had a massive stroke and doctors did not think she was going to make it. But as I keep saying, God being who He is, she's here with us today. And it's our honor and privilege to continue in a conversation with Tia. So when we went to break, we were talking about the fact that half of your skull had to be removed because the swelling in your brain was such that it could have suffocated you.
Yes.
So what was that like for you?
I'm not sure. I think I was sedated the whole time. But my brain swelling did get really bad, and they had to call my parents and tell them that it took a turn for the worse. So that's when everybody went crazy. They took that off, and then it was off for like 6 months. I had to wear a helmet that whole time my skull was off because the helmet was actually acting as my skull because that skull section was frozen down in North Carolina where I was at school, at the hospital.
Wow. You are walking around with half a skull, and the other half is in a freezer,
Yes.
somewhere freezing. Can you imagine that? And just being able, even with the helmet, to decide that you're going to make it and that you're going to live and that you're not going to give up. Talk to me a little bit about that. At what point did you have to have a conversation with yourself to say, okay, this happened. I've had a massive stroke, but what?
I have to keep fighting. No matter if I have, like with my skull was off, I felt like a beast. I felt so ugly. I used to cry because I just thought I looked so ugly. I felt disfigured. And I had to go in the mall into the store with a helmet on my head. I felt just so ugly.
Can I stop you a minute?
Sure.
You said you went into the mall, into the store.
Yes.
That took courage.
In a wheelchair and in a helmet.
But some
It was a
people
lot.
would have stayed in the house and hid. And so for me, the idea that you were able to muster up the courage to say, I'm not going to hide this from the world. I mean, hats off to you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's inspiring in and of itself, because some folk watching us, Tia, are sitting home having a pity party about something as trivial as my boyfriend broke up with me, or my children are acting crazy, or I have a job but I really don't like the job that I have. Tia had a stroke, had part of her skull removed, had to wear a helmet for 6 months, and she got up every day. And what did you say to yourself?
I say you got to keep going no matter what you look like. You can't let this change who you are. If you want to still be a pretty girl and just wear makeup or pretty clothes, go to the mall and shop, don't let it stop you. So what, you have a helmet on.
Wow. Well, now, were you this kind of person before the stroke, just very determined,
Yes.
very tenacious about life?
Definitely, most definitely.
So if you had to say one way that the stroke changed you, what would you say?
It made me stronger. Like, it made me fight even harder. I was a hard fighter before, but now I fight even harder because I want my life back so bad.
Amen. Amen. Well, you have a good part of it back. How long was the period between when you got your skull back, the other half that was frozen, to where you are now? How long a period was that recovery?
I got my skull section replaced on February 11, 2011. So we're coming on like a year and a half. 2 years will be next year.
Mm-hmm. And when you got your skull back, did it feel different?
My headaches got a little worse because my brain had got used to pulsating without the skull on. So then it was pulsating back against the skull, so they got a little worse.
Now, you know, I don't know about you all, but I did not know that you could live with half a skull. I don't know. I didn't know that. Did you know that prior to them?
I had no idea.
Okay, so I'm like listening to you and thinking, oh my goodness, you know, the way in which God has created our bodies, that it can take care of itself and that it knows what to do to shift. And when we talk about physical wellness, that's what we're talking about. Taking care of yourself in such a way that you can notice signs and symptoms so that someone around you can help you do the best by yourself. So if you happen to get in those compromising positions, you can get help, as Tia did, and save your own life. So when the doctors told your parents that you were taking a turn for the worse, did you hear that? Or did they tell you?
They told me, like, my sister was describing it to me once. She said they were walking up to the hospital and they got that phone call. She just dropped to her knees, like it was devastating.
And how did your parents take it?
My mother told them, do whatever you need to do to save my baby's life. Because they say, can we take her skull off? She was like, do whatever you need to do. So they just really wanted for them to help me in the best way that they could.
How many days did it take for your parents to get to you? Or how many hours, probably, I should ask?
Well, I drove to North Carolina in 5 hours, but I probably took them 8 hours.
Okay,
Like
so
the normal
8
time.
hours. Now, are you at all conscious at this time? Were you
No.
ever in a coma?
No, after the football game, the first thing I remember is waking up in ICU.
Okay. And so you're in ICU, and what do you see? Because is your vision affected at all?
My eye was swollen shut because all this was swollen. So I think I can only say I with one eye. And I guess eventually once that swelling went down, I opened my eyes. And I remember my sister standing there asking me to write on a piece of paper.
Was there ever a point where you said, I can't do this?
There's a lot of times, I don't think I've ever given up. I do say, why am I not better yet? There's a lot of times where I get, why is this not coming fast enough? I never say, no, I'm not going to do it. I always fought as hard as I could.
Did you ever get mad at God?
I just asked them why
Okay.
at so young.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I am so honored and privileged. I keep saying that, but I really, really am that you are here. And I really hope that we take something away from Tia's story. And if it's nothing else but not to complain, take something away so that you too can live your great life and have the kind of courage that Tia displayed to us today. We'll be right back. Before the break, we had an opportunity to talk with Tia Timpson. She shared with us about her experience in having a massive stroke. And now we get to meet Tia's parents, Damone and Panora Timpson. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate you all being here. I was saying earlier that it is every parent's desire that when we send our kids off to school, that they're going to have a great time. They may party a little bit, but they're going to get in there and take care of their business. But your experience was different because on September the 12th, 2010, you received a phone call that changed a whole lot of things. Tell us about that call.
We did. I'd like to go back to the Saturday before because the event started for me on Saturday. I spoke with Tia. I had picked up a few things for her from the store and called her to let her know that I had some things for her and asked if she wanted me to mail them to her, but she decided that since she would be driving home the next month for her orthodontist appointment, she would just pick them up then. And we talked about her work and how her supervisor had scheduled her for the late shift too often and leaving her tired for classes. So I told her to talk to that supervisor and ask if she could give her better hours. That would help with her schedule. So we chatted a little longer and ended the conversation.
Well, now, was that a place of concern for you when you heard her talk about the late hours?
It was, because I know too well how heavy a burden Tia was carrying, and that those late hours just didn't help with that. So I'd imagine that it would eventually become too stressful for her. She was handling it at the time, but just looking forward, I just didn't think that it would be good for her to continue working late hours and have 8 o'clock classes. So the next morning, Sunday morning, started out as a normal Sunday morning, and I called Tia, and she really didn't want to talk. She was tired because, again, she had worked a night shift the night before, and I just asked her to call me later in the day. So hours had passed, and the phone rang late afternoon.
Where were you when the phone rang?
I was at home. I believe I was in the basement.
Okay.
And Tia's name showed on the phone, name and number, so I thought that she was getting back to me.
Okay.
But when I answered, there was someone else on the other end of the phone calling to tell us that she'd collapsed, and they wanted us to get to North Carolina as soon as possible because it did not look good.
Now, were you familiar with the voice on the other end of the phone?
I was not. I had never talked to that person before.
Wow.
So I shared the news with Damon. He fell apart. I glued him back together.
So interesting.
Called our other daughter to tell her.
Interestingly enough, usually when we hear bad news, women are prone to falling apart. But in this case, you fell apart.
Yes, I did.
So what were you thinking when she told you that?
I was in shock. I was afraid for Tia because I couldn't get there soon enough to do the best I could, to help her out.
Right.
And it was very scary.
So wait a minute, 1 second. I want to ask this question. How long did it take you from the time you got the call to get in your car and make your way to North Carolina?
We couldn't just jump in the car and hit the road. We had to wait for our older daughter to get to us. She lives about 25 minutes away. So when she got there, then we jumped in the car and headed down to get to Tia.
Okay. We'll be right back. Hold that thought. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Tia Timpson, and I'm a stroke survivor. Knowing the stroke warning signs can help save a life. If you think somebody's having a stroke, remember the word FAST. F is for face. Ask the person to smile. See if you notice any weakness or droopiness on one side of their face. Then A is for arm. Ask them to raise their arm and see if you notice that it's weak or dangling. S is for speech. Ask them to say a simple sentence and see if you notice any slurred speech or stumbling over their words. If you notice any of those, remember it's T. Time to call 911 as soon as possible. My stroke almost killed me, so please try to help save another life. Thank you.
And we're back. So we talked about the stroke. We talked about the phone call. I want to talk a little bit about the ride and what happened when you got there. What was that experience like?
Needless to say, that ride was the longest of my life.
I could only imagine.
And I had my husband in tears the whole time. And
so you're in tears. Why? Because you're thinking what?
The worst.
You're thinking the worst.
The worst.
And the worst is you're going to get there and...
I don't know. I don't know what to expect once I got there.
And as a dad, your daughter is miles away. You're on your way there. I know your wife was saying earlier that she prayed. Did you get to the point where you also started to pray?
Yes, I started praying. Praying very heavily and hoping Tia could,
hold on
until we get there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you're in the car. Longest
in the
ride
car,
of your life.
right. And I was on the phone for the duration of the ride because the doctors just called continuously, giving me updates. The doctors from the first hospital talked about all the tests that they were running, and they called me to update me on the results, and everything came back negative. They really thought meningitis because she was a college student.
This is the first hospital where they don't know and treat strokes, right?
Well, they do, but not to the extent of the second hospital.
Okay.
But at that point, they hadn't realized, they hadn't recognized it as a stroke. And of course, we were losing valuable time all along. So when they finally realized that it was a stroke, that's when they transferred her to the second hospital. And the doctors there knew that her condition at that point was dire. They had just lost too much time. So that's when it really hit me that we weren't going to get there in time. So I kept praying, God, give us this, we need this time. So when we got there, they had gone in, they had completed a surgery to go in and bust a clot.
And you're on the phone.
I'm on the phone the whole time,
they're doing
talking to
surgery
doctor after doctor and relaying to him what the doctors were saying to me. The last doctor that I spoke with during the ride told us that, in so many words, within her limits, she tried to break it to us as gently as she could that Tia was not going to make it. And she did not have to go into detail. I knew what she was trying to tell me.
And so when you hear that, you share that with your husband?
I did not.
You did not?
No, he was already a
No,
I didn't want to make it worse.
Bad worse.
No.
So you made the decision, I can't give this to him right now.
No, he was not ready for that. He wasn't ready.
On her face or anything?
No, I couldn't.
Okay.
I couldn't tell.
Okay.
I kept my composure as best I could.
Okay.
And our daughter, she was in tears as well. I didn't share it with her either. You know, I just needed them to try to get it together.
Okay.
You know, and this would have just done just the opposite. It would have made that situation much worse. So getting back to the trip, once we had reached the hospital and gotten to where Tia was, they had just completed the surgery to bust the clot. And that's when the swelling had started. And they were saying, you know, they couldn't stop it. But Tia had mentioned the swelling, but she neglected to mention excessive bleeding. Okay. So that was also a major concern. So between the two, they just did not think she had the strength to pull through.
So what did busting the clot do?
Well, it relieved the pressure on her brain.
Okay.
But by that time, it was in the evening. This stroke had happened early in the day, and the window for the medications is only 4 hours long.
Right,
we had passed that hours ago.
Right.
So she was in the woods for quite a while, and shortly after we got in there, that's when they decided to do the craniectomy and remove the skull. After that,
what was that like? Just hearing that as parents that they have to take, because as Tia was telling us, I'm thinking to myself, as I said earlier, I'm thinking you can't live with a half of a skull. So what was that like as parents, knowing that this is what they have to do to your daughter?
I had never heard of it before, but at that point, it was all about saving her life. Yes. And I told them to do what they needed to do to save her life, and they did just that. And I guess the extent of it didn't hit me until a few days later. Okay. I knew they just had to go in and do these major surgeries, and it entailed removing half of her skull and freezing it. So maybe not a few days later, I guess when I actually saw her. And I saw my daughter disfigured with a section of her head. You know, it's like someone had just removed, sliced off a whole section. Wow. And it was a horrible sight to see. Wow. She was unresponsive, of course. She was highly sedated, and
what got you all through just that much of it? I know you
prayer
said
for
you
me.
were a praying woman,
and
I imagine just having each other.
Yes, prayer.
Helped you to get through it.
I relied entirely on my faith, entirely. And
so I don't want to lose the whole notion of, because we know that this was an ordeal and that a lot transpired in this amount of time. Let's talk a little bit about recovery, like, because we got to see Tia in an amazing state, but just as you said a few moments ago, she was disfigured to a point where it was really hard for you to look at. What has the recovery for the last year and a half looked like? What has that been like?
Wow, such an awesome trial. We started, she was hospitalized in North Carolina for 5 to 6 weeks. Okay. Then she was transported back to Maryland via ambulance. It was a 7-hour trip for her. And they took her directly to outpatient rehab at Kernan Hospital. And there she stayed for another 5 weeks before she was allowed to come home. But when she did come home, she was unable to walk, unable to talk. She had to relearn everything. Wow. And Tia was always very active, always an overachiever, and whatever she attempted to do, she excelled at it. So I prayed, asking God if He would just give that back to her, because
How many surgeries?
a total of 4 so far, and she's due to undergo 2 more this year.
What would you say has been your best takeaway from this? Because I absolutely believe that in anything that we go through, there's a lesson and there's a blessing.
Always.
What would you say really quickly in the next 30 seconds was your biggest lesson?
I think just to rely more on God, because I couldn't have gotten through it without Him. And I have a message to other caregivers or people who just nurture loved ones who go through similar challenges. The first thing is to just dig deep, and you purge all the things that you don't want, but you have to muster up the good stuff. And God instills so much power in us, and we have to realize that it's there and use it.
And I think that we don't realize that. I think that we don't recognize the power that we have, and it's not until we get in the midst of crises, if we choose to rely on our faith, that we finally get to understand the power that we have. I have absolutely been extremely blessed by your testimony and by your courage and by your strength, and I hope that what you shared will inspire another parent or another person in the place of Tia who's had a stroke or a serious traumatic illness to just make a decision to live and not die. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're back, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in with us again this week. I hope that something Tia Timpson said, as well as her parents, inspired you, gave you the strength, the fortitude, the courage to get up and do something amazing with your life. Ladies and gentlemen, if that young lady could go through all that she did and still stand before us with the conviction that nothing is going to stop her, I ask you, what's your excuse? Just like I asked myself, Mischa, what might be your excuse? Again, her testimony shows us that regardless of what life handles to you, you have the ability to make a decision about how you're going to handle it. I invite you to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Mischa Show. We're also on Twitter at twitter.com/greatnessnow. And then you can check us out on our website at www.greatnessnow.org. Next week, you do not want to miss the show. We're going to be talking about using your gifts and talents to make money, to be able to take care of yourself, to not just make money, but to do what you were purposed and called to do. So next week, we're going to be talking about branding based on the gift that you've been given. Remember, greatness is your birthright. Therefore, you need no one's permission or approval to be great.